Slider Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. We're going to strike the root in this segment. I want to answer the question, why do so many people blame racism for the problems in their lives? Why do so many people blame racism for the problem in their lives? Let's strike the root. People feel all kinds of painful emotions. We all do. Envy, greed, bitterness, resentment, anxiety, regret. Oh, regret. I think that's one of the worst. Regret. These are not external matters. These are internal sins, and people deal with them differently. Some people drink them away, for instance, right? There's lots of different coping mechanisms that people have, most of them very unhealthy. And one of the ways that people deal with these emotions is to blame other people for their problems and to call other people racists. You either call a person racist, or if you can't point to a person, you blame racist systems and call it systemic racism or racist institutions, structural racism, right? So I got an example for today. Scottie Pippen. Here's the backstory. Michael Jordan, best player in the NBA. Scottie Pippen was the number 2 guy on the Chicago Bulls when Jordan was on his prime, right? So Scottie Pippen's there. He's always in Jordan's shadow. If there was no Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen would have been the best player in the league, but he was always overlooked. So Jordan leaves and goes play baseball for a couple years. So this is Pippen's chance to shine, and he takes his team to the playoffs. So they're in the playoffs, they're playing the Knicks, they're down 2-0 in the series. It's the end of the game. There's 1.8 seconds left. And Phil Jackson, who's like arguably one of the greatest NBA coaches of all time, he's ready to draw up the play. And who's going to take the game-winning shot? Michael Jordan's not there anymore, so who's going to take it? Of course, it's Tony Kukoc. That's that guy. Phil Jackson drew up the play, and the game-winning shot was not Pippen. So Pippen, the captain, refuses to even play. He sits on the bench. Kukoc makes the shot. As you see, the series goes on. Pippen feels he was slighted by his coach. That was his chance to be the hero. Every other game-winning shot in his career went to Jordan. That was his chance to shine, and the coach drew up the play for the white guy. So he sat out. It was a super selfish move, and I'm sure he's had to live, well, he's definitely had to live with that the rest of his life and feel shame for his action there. Now, that was in 1994, 27 years ago. Surely Scottie Pippen has a lot of regrets in his life. We all do. And I think we can all at least begin to sort of imagine how difficult it may be to be in Jordan's shadow his entire life, right? And you're also plagued with what my life could have been if I got center stage. He also has a lot of bitterness because if you watch the Jordan documentary, he got paid a fraction of what Jordan certainly did, but also of what he could have made. And that's another story, right? And when you're a pro athlete, your entire identity is on your fame and your status and your achievement. That is a toxic place to be. And he's been there his entire life. And even though he's retired, he's still living there. So that's the context. There's one more piece of context, but I'll share it after this clip here. This is Scottie Pippen yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show.
If you knew that Scottie Pippen had been with the Bulls from '87, battled through the Pistons and every other team that we had to get to those 3 championships, wouldn't you give Scottie Pippen one opportunity to get a last-second shot without Michael Jordan? Like 1 year without Michael Jordan. Can I get one shot? Like, I'm doing all the dirty work.
But all of that I understand from the basketball standpoint. But when you say a racial move,
well, why would Tony, who was a rookie, get the last-second shot and you put me out of bounds? That's what I mean, racial. Like, that was Scottie Pippen's team.
But
Scottie
Phil
Pippen
then
was on pace to be an MVP that year, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, why would you put him in a position not to be successful? Why wouldn't you put him in a position to succeed? Michael Jordan is not there. So who's next in line for you?
But have you talked to Phil about this? Because by saying a racial move, then you're you're calling Phil a racist.
I don't got a problem with that.
Do you think Phil was or is?
Oh, yeah. I mean, do you remember Phil Jackson left the Lakers, wrote a book on Kobe Bryant, and then came back and coached him? I mean, who would do that?
All right. So you want the present context to that story? I mean, you just heard the 1994 context. Now you understand the play and his whole life and always feeling slighted and second best and all that. You want the present day context? Scottie Pippen's oldest son passed away in April. He was 33 years old. Every article I read about it, it doesn't say what happened, which means it was probably suicide. And there's also a question there about his son, right? Always having to live under the shadow of his dad, Scottie Pippen. And then Pippen's college coach and mentor passed away the month before, back in May, or I forget the month, April, May, they both have, I forget. The point is, he's got a lot going on. Now here's my conclusion of this. We as human beings, we need to try and make sense of the things that are happening in our life. And we need to make sense of the bad emotions that we feel. And no one ever wants to conclude, well, maybe I was at fault here, right? No one wants to look within. We like to blame external things. And racism is very convenient. And it's very sympathetic today, right? If you say someone's a racist, no one's going to challenge you on that. And I'm not picking on Scottie Pippen, right? When you're in a dark place, which for a lot of reasons, a lot of people are in this country, right? Mental health is at an all-time low, depression all-time high, right? When you're in a really dark place, you can construct an entire universe where everyone is against you and you got cheated out of what you deserve. The whole world's against you. Now, in Christianity, there's an answer for this. Because if you're a Christian, you realize that what you deserve is to spend eternity in hell. That's what you deserve. And you pray to God, God, thank you for not giving me what I deserve. Thank you for Jesus, so that I'm not going to hell, so I don't get what I deserve. But if you are your own God and you talk about yourself in the third person, if you're your own God, you deserve everything. I don't know how much money Scottie Pippen made in his life, but right, let's say it's 100 million. I deserve 500 million. I deserve as much as Michael Jordan does. I deserve that shot. I deserve the spotlight. I deserve. Why are more people not worshiping me? Why do I not have more? And then on Scottie's case, on top of all that, why are all these bad things happening to me? Why is my son dying, et cetera? Why wasn't I the MVP? Racism. Does it make sense? No, of course, it makes no sense whatsoever. I wonder if Phil Jackson's even going to respond to it. Is it true? Doesn't matter. It feels good in the moment to blame someone else. And again, I'm not picking on Scottie Pippen here. People do this all the time. I would argue that this is the vast majority of racism complaints in America today are people who are unhappy with their lives, and racism is a good excuse for it all. Or on the flip side, you have people who are very, very successful and they blame racism just because they want to have solidarity with the people who are crying racism. Like why would Will Smith say America's racist? Right? If not for some solidarity with the people. So you got both sides there. All right, that's Scottie Pippen. I got another point I want to make here. When you're in a society that's removed all objective truth and removed the very concept of morality and has removed the virtue of merit, then race is all we're left with to define ourselves and to define each other, right? We used to define people like, oh, he's a great guy. Based off of what? Well, based off of his moral code and based off of his merit. Well, now you can't, those things are white supremacist values now. Morality and merit, right? So how do we define each other? Well, the most shallow thing that there is, race, skin color. That's how we are left to define ourselves, right? Tony Kukoc, white. Scottie Pippen, black. That's it. That's how we define ourselves. And if that's how we define ourselves and define each other when things aren't going well for me, well, it's racism that is to blame, right? We said this when people were tearing statues down all last summer. By the way, the left is not anti-statue. The left is not anti-statue. It's not like they're like against the architectural concept of a statue in a city space. They are for tearing down anything that was, anything Western, anything white, anything American, anything good, anything noble, and anything that is. They just want to destroy and replace. So they're not anti-statue. They're anti-statue of George Washington, and they're for replacing them with statues of George Floyd. If there was ever a person in history who is more undeserving of a statue to them, so why does he get one? Because race. Does he deserve it because of his moral code? No. Does he deserve it because of his virtue? Does he deserve it because of merit? No, race. That's how we define each other now. And that was all that's needed to define him. Just race. There's 2 statues of George Floyd now. One in Brooklyn, one in Newark. We talked about it when they were first put up a couple weeks ago, but now they've been vandalized. And here's the mayor of New York City. Last night, a far-right extremist group vandalized a statue of George Floyd, a racist, loathsome, despicable act of hate. The City Cleanup Corps is repairing the statue right now, and a hate crime investigation is underway. We will bring these cowards to justice. And Matt Walsh wrote back, don't you mean that a group of peaceful protesters exercised their free speech rights through a nonviolent form of protest? You see the irony here, of course, the hypocrisy that he's pointing out. There was an art history professor last year who, someone posted a video of people tearing down a Christopher Columbus statue. And she wrote back, I'm a professor who studies the deliberate destruction of cultural heritage. And I have to say, use chains instead of rope, it'll go faster. And she linked to a person who went through a very detailed description of how to tear down obelisks. These are like the Washington Monument. PSA, for anyone who might be interested in how to pull down an obelisk safely from an Egyptologist, someone who studies Egypt, who never ever in a million years thought this advice might come in handy. And she goes on and gives incredible detail about how to tear down these statues. These people are in a lot of pain. Those people who tore down that statue there, they're just like Scottie Pippen. You see the connection? They're just like Scottie Pippen. They got a lot of problems in their life. They're in a dark place. They don't want to look within. They don't want to find any comfort in any healthy way or any contentment. They're just lashing out, looking for people and things to blame. And where you can't blame an individual person, you blame the system. And where you can't blame an actual person and talk to them face to face, you blame a statue. And you tear down a statue, something that can't defend itself. So what is all this? You want to strike the root? It's hurt and pain and power. I want to play this video of Jack McAfee. I know nothing about this guy, all right? John McAfee. I know nothing about this guy. All I know is he's like the software guy, right? The McAfee software, virus software. And he didn't pay his taxes, and he was in a Spanish prison, and he was just about to be extradited back to America, but then he committed suicide. But he committed suicide after he said he would never commit suicide. But from my understanding of this guy, he's the kind of guy who would absolutely say he would never commit suicide and then commit suicide just to make it like a whole big thing. I know nothing about the guy, it's not the point. I was told this is the last video he ever made. I don't know if that's true, but either way, what he says here is spot on.
Why does power corrupt? Well, let's take a look at the human species. Humans are compassionate and loving, gracious, kind, generous people. We are simultaneously greedy, jealous, envious, angry. We're a mixed bag. And if you give one of the human species power, which part of ourselves uses it? Love? Love does not need power, people. It flowers from the heart. Grace, grace certainly needs no power. Compassion, generosity, no, these are simply things that flow from our good nature. What uses power? Well, greed certainly needs power, doesn't it? If you have enough power, you can take anything you want. Anger, anger definitely would love some power, would it not? Envy? Well, with power, whatever you're envious of, you can duplicate on your own. No, it is that negative, unsocial, not life-supporting part of the human animal that needs power. Nothing else needs power. And so we give people power over others through government, through military, and we expect them not to be corrupt. Wake up, people. Be very cautious who you give power to. Thank you.
Love does not need power. Compassion does not need power. Generosity does not need power. You just do those things. Hate needs power. Anger needs power. Greed needs power. Envy needs power. And people who feel bitterness, resentment, and all these other things we've been talking about here, they want power to make themselves feel better. Hurt needs power. And there's a lot of hurt people looking for more of it. Coming up next, talk about this woman, this hammer thrower woman who turned her back on the American flag at the Olympic trials. You're going to see a lot more of this when the Olympics start up next month. So we'll talk about the root of that coming up next as well. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, woke athletes in the Olympics. Oh, it's going to be insufferable. The Olympics are in like 3 or 4 weeks or so. It's such a bummer, too, because I was watching the Olympic trials for track, and I watched the guys run the 800 meter, which I think that's like the most excruciating race. Mentally, that's got to be brutal. You sprint around the track once, and then you got to do it again. Like, oh, it'd be so... Anyway, so the guys got done, and the top 3 made it, and they go over there, interviewed, and they're ecstatic. The world champion didn't make the team. He got like 6th place. He bombed. So these 3 guys made it. They're like, oh, it's great. Thanks, my mom and my coach. This is for you, and this is for America. Oh, I can't wait to go represent America. It's great. And he grabs an American flag and runs around the track. All 3 of them do, and it's great. That's what this country needs that right now. But instead, we're going to get just insufferable brats like this woman, who's gonna get all the attention and ruin it for everyone. The female hammer thrower. She got 3rd place. There she is. And had a hissy fit on the podium, turned away from the flag, while the other 2, as you see, were standing there, proper, hand over heart. And you had this brat sulking and turning away and held up this shirt or something that said, look at her, she's just the worst. Held up this shirt that said activist athlete. Gwen Berry is her name. And she said, I don't understand this at all. She said it was a setup. And I really don't even know what she's talking about. Like, she said the playing of the national anthem was a setup. I don't know what she's even referring to. Like, that's what they do. But I can't try to make sense of it because it doesn't make sense, because to narcissists, it's always all about them. That's it. That's a key aspect of our culture today and of wokeism. It's all about me, all the time. Why? Because we've had about a decade or so of social media infusing itself into our psyches like I'm not even gonna say like drip by drip, fire hose all day, every day for a decade plus, telling you, reinforcing to you nonstop all day that everything in life is about me, me, me. And that's gonna mess you up. It was a lot harder to be a narcissist back in the day. Right? You could only transmit yourself to the people in your immediate circle. And if you were just a narcissist all the time, those people would reject you. So you can only get away with it for so long before you wise up and you're like, geez, if I want to be included in anything ever, I got to stop being such a flaming narcissist all the time. How could you be a narcissist? I don't even know how it's possible. Like, let's say you're when I think social media, I think 16-year-old girl, but there's tons of people on social. But let's say you're a 16-year-old girl, right? You're a 16-year-old girl and you're living on a farm in 1880 in Virginia. How are you going to be a narcissist? What are you going to do? You're busy milking cows all day. What are you going to do? You're going to be a brat to your dad who's working all day? You're going to be a spoiled brat to your mom who's busy making the pair of shoes that you're going to use that year? I can't even fathom how you would be a narcissist back in the day. But with social media, you have enough people cycling through your social media accounts that you could be a narcissist all the time, and people will reject you. If they do, usually narcissists get even more attention, right? But even if the people did reject you, then you would just get more people to follow you, and then like you're a narcissist, so they reject you. But then there's an endless supply of attention, right? And your narcissism it knows no bounds. There's no ends to it. It's never stopped. There's never a, right? So like if let's say there's 100 people follow you on Twitter and you're just a flaming narcissist, and those 100 people are like, I'm out. I'm gone. I don't pay attention to you. Well, then you get another 100 people who are going to follow you, and you can keep being a narcissist. And then they leave, and then another 100 people, and you just keep being a narcissist forever and ever and ever. And 10 years of that, you're going to be a narcissist. And people are going to sink deeper and deeper into their delusions and into their mental illness until you become like that person. Now, no one likes, or no one proudly announces that they're a narcissist. So they always got to paint it and package it with nice flowery language. So here's this hammer thrower. My purpose and my mission is bigger than sports. I'm here to represent those who died due to systemic racism. That's the important part. That's why I'm going. That's why I'm here today. These are devoted cult members, very devoted evangelicals. So that's the root of it all. It's just flaming narcissism. The metal podium, it's not about you, especially if you're third place. All right, lady? If you won, it'd still be inappropriate, but like maybe you wouldn't, but then you could at least put it out. You got third. All right? But it's not about you. The whole moment's not about you. This holds true for the person. This happens every Olympics too. There's someone who gets second place. It's usually in like a subjective sport, like figure skating or gymnastics or something, where the person gets second place and they thought they should have won, so they put the medal on them and then they take it right off. Right? And it's like, no, it's not about you. It's not about you. Especially if you got third. You're barely even invited up there. You're not even the first place loser. You're the second place loser. It's about the person who got first. So give them their credit. Move on with your little insignificant life. This is Matt Walsh. He said, in a healthy and self-respecting society, she would be kicked off the team and shamed as the spoiled, rotten child that she is. Instead, she'll be lionized as a hero. Jesse Kelly, Americans will never be more than 25 feet away from endless supplies of clean drinking water and still complain about their own country. Meanwhile, some Olympic athlete from some third world dump will wave his flag proudly. I guarantee you, in the Olympics, you're gonna have some American do something like this. You're not gonna have a single person from a second or third world country, or probably any other country, disrespect their flag and disrespect their country like that. It's not gonna happen. There's no chance that will happen. But the Americans will do it. Why? Jesse Kelly, was on Tucker's show the other day. It was awesome. And here's a clip of that.
Honestly, it sounds hokey, it sounds cliche, but the reason we are in this predicament in this country is simply patriotism. We have a patriotism problem. If you have a high enough percentage of your population that loves their country, you're going to have a good country. Why? Because if you have so many people, if there are 100 people in the country and 85 of them wake up every day saying, this is a great place, well, why do I feed my kids? Because I love my kids, therefore I feel like I have a duty to do right by my kids. Same way it works in a country. You wake up every single day, this is a wonderful place. I have a duty to serve it, to protect it, to make sure it stays the way it is because it's blessed me so much and provided me these opportunities. But if 85 out of 100 people wake up every day and think this place sucks, well, then you're in a lot of trouble.
I love this country, which is why I agree with our friend Hans Feeney, who said you got to throw these American-hating, self-aggrandizing brats off our Olympic teams. I would rather lose every Olympic event than win one medal with these vile narcissists. Fortunately, you're going to see a lot more of it when the Olympics start coming up. Coming up next, we talked yesterday, we did a whole segment on how social justice is communism. That's all it is. That's the root of it. It is purely their justification for the redistribution of goods. And I got another example of one of those redistributive policies coming out of DC. Hey, Static Crusaders, I want to prove something that we talked about yesterday. So we made the claim that whenever you hear social justice, it means communism. Now, that sounds like a lot, but let me quote from a United Nations report. Social justice may be broadly understood as the fair and compassionate distribution of the fruits of economic growth. That's redistribution of goods. What do you want me to... Social justice is not possible without strong and coherent redistributive policies conceived and implemented by public agencies. I have an example of one of those public agencies redistributing money. It's from the American Rescue Plan Act, which was signed in March. It's $1.9 trillion. And there's a loan forgiveness program in there, but not for everyone. Wen Fa is here. He's from the Pacific Legal Foundation. Wen, you're the third person at Pacific Legal Foundation I've talked to in the last 2 weeks because you guys keep winning Supreme Court cases. You guys are absolutely crushing it. And I'm super grateful for you guys. Thanks for all the wonderful work you do.
Thank you. Means a lot. And thanks for having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure. First of all, that's what I just said is a lot, right? Like social justice equals communism. But I mean, what do you think about that UN definition of social justice and the redistributing of goods? Am I exaggerating it here?
Well, I do think that a lot of people have a lot of different definitions of social justice. I think the problem with a lot of policies being advocated for by people who say that they're advocating for social justice is that it really drowns out individualism. It doesn't take into the account that we all are individuals. We all have our individual aspirations, our individual abilities, our individual achievements. And we're not just members of our racial group. And I think that's what a lot of those social justice warriors and social justice advocates miss.
I want to get back to that because that's super interesting. But let's get to the story here. So what is this loan forgiveness program?
So this loan forgiveness is a bill that was signed into law by President Biden in March of this year. It forgives outstanding farm loans up to 120% of the original loan amount as of January 1st of this year to a subset of farmers. And the problematic part about this loan forgiveness program is that it hinges eligibility solely on the basis of one's race. Any minority farmer with an eligible loan is categorically eligible. Any white farmer is categorically excluded, no matter what that person's circumstances are. So we're representing a farmer in Florida and challenging this law as discriminatory and unconstitutional. And we're happy to announce that we got a win in district court, stopping this program from going into effect nationwide last Wednesday.
Well done. How is this any different than affirmative action?
Well, I think it's actually much worse than affirmative action. First of all, just to back up a little bit, I don't like the term affirmative action. I prefer racial preferences, because that's what a lot of the affirmative action programs these days do, is that they give preferences to individuals solely on the basis of their membership in a racial group. But whereas affirmative action usually gives, partial preference to an individual on the basis of race, this is a categorical exclusion of individuals on the basis of race. This is flat out discriminatory and flat out unconstitutional under the principle of equality before the law.
I'm so grateful you called out that word, that language that I lazily used as I've just taken on what I've been told, right? Like, affirmative action, and that's the left controlling the language there. So thank you for calling me out on that. What did you say again? Racial preferences? Is that what you prefer?
Racial preferences, yes. So affirmative action as a word was originally used was I think it's a word out of the Kennedy administration, encouraging agencies to take affirmative action to make sure there was sufficient outreach and things like that. And we don't object to that. Everybody should know about opportunities that are available to them. But the word as it is used today connotes racial preferences, giving individuals preferences on the basis of their race. And we think that's wrong and unconstitutional.
Yeah, and this is a flat out exclusion, as you talked about. Okay, like, it's so no-brainer. So here's my question. What is a minority? What defines minority under this law?
So this law excludes white farmers. It includes everybody except for white farmers. So minority includes Blacks, Hispanics, Asian Americans, Native Americans, and anybody except for white farmers. And
okay, so then what's their definition of white then?
well, they have a form that farmers have to fill out when they are applying for these loans. And the form itself actually says the government is prohibited from discriminating on the basis of race. And I think that's accurate. But what farmers didn't know when they filled out this form was it's going to be used sometimes years later to discriminate against them on the basis of race and loan forgiveness. And I think that's wrong.
Did a farmer have to fill in that bubble about what race they are?
They did not. Most farmers did. Farmers who did not fill out that bubble were encouraged this year, I think last month, to check that bubble. They were told by the USDA that this loan forgiveness eligibility for loan assistance under this provision is based on race. So if you're a minority farmer and you haven't filled out this bubble, now is your time. And we think that's wrong. The grant of benefits solely on the basis of race is flat out unconstitutional.
Wow. Okay. So I hope you guys will win this battle ultimately. But they're not going to stop. They're going to keep, even if you win, they're not going to stop trying to do things like this, right? Let's assume you lose and we see more of these. What would this look like in the future, this exclusion of racial categories? Where do you see that going?
Well, it's hard to tell, but, and I think we have a very strong legal case and a very strong moral case. But if there were precedent that's saying that the government can just blanketly exclude and include people on the basis of race, I think by the same logic, they could start forgiving student loans on the basis of race. They could have different mortgage programs depending on one's race. And I think that's inconsistent with the fundamental nature of America, that we're all entitled to individual liberty. We're all individuals with our unique individual stories, and the government should not be treating us on the basis of our membership in a government-mandated racial group.
Wen Fa from the Pacific Legal Foundation. I'm telling you, everyone, they're fantastic over there. They've done amazing work. Wen, what was it? I was talking to one of the guys the other day. You guys have won something like 13 of 15 Supreme Court cases you've argued, or some amazing rate like that?
Absolutely. 13. We represent our clients free of charge all over the country. We won 13 out of 15 cases before the Supreme Court of the United States. And our latest Supreme Court one was actually just last Wednesday. So we have a great track record. Well
done. Wen, appreciate you, man. Let's talk again.
Thank you so much.
Keep us up to date on it. I wanted, coming back, we're talking to one of my favorite guests. And I want to dive deeper into what Wen mentioned in the beginning and the end there about individual versus group identity. Because you have to look at that through one particular lens. And our next guest is going to do a perfect job of them. They're coming up next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusader. So I'm sure you heard like 2 weeks ago or something, some NFL player came out as gay, and whatever, the first, whatever. So the NFL decided to jump on this moment and came out with this advertisement here. I don't know who that's for. Who, like what? One of our friends, Pastor Dave Engelhardt, is here from King's Church in New York City. Pastor, how are you, sir?
Doing great, Mike. Good to be here as always.
We're bombarded, man. It's everywhere. It's been Pride Month. The other day, Disney Plus had their Pride event. We can give it Blue's Clues the other day had their drag queen, whatever. Nick Jr. Nick Jr. It's everywhere, Pastor.
You know, I don't know if you caught that right at the end of that commercial. There was that text, and the last phrase of the text said, "If at least one person in their family accepts their new belief system, behavior system, I like to call it, then there's a 40% reduction that they will, likelihood of suicide." So that what they're saying is, if you don't agree with our tenets, our moral tenets, you're a murderer. You're killing people for not believing morally exactly what we should believe. And I mean, there's not a stronger statement to say morally than, if you don't agree with us, you're a killer, you're a murderer. And that's how extreme our political language is these days. And or ideological language, or however you want to frame it. But that's the nature of sexual sin, is to spread like a wildfire. And Will Durant is a famous historian, classical thinker. He said sexuality is like a river of fire. It must be bordered and banked at every turn, lest it consume the individual and the community. And the crazy thing, Mike, is Will Durant is an atheist, but he's a historian, and he understands at every instance of culture that's gone extremely wealthy, sexual anarchy, which is sexuality outside of the bounds of God's determination, takes over the culture and destroys it. And check this picture out. In Genesis chapter 19, God's going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And the word Sodom is place of burning. So you can picture like a fire out of control. And the word Gomorrah, if you take the name Gomorrah and you match it with the king's name, it means place that is drowning. That's what Gomorrah means, with iniquity. The king his name means iniquity. So you have a flood of iniquity, or you have a wildfire out of the place. And this is the picture. Sexuality out of the bounds that God's given to us is a flood that drowns us, or it's a wildfire out of control. They're natural devices that break the bounds that have been given as blessing. Water is obviously a massive blessing. Fire is obviously a massive blessing. But when you take fire and you take it out of the fireplace and you put it on the living room floor, we all get destroyed. And when you take the blessing of sexuality and you take it out of the bounds that God gave it to us in, it destroys the whole community, because it breaks down family, it breaks down mom and dad, it breaks down all that familial loyalty one to another, and it destroys nations for the history of mankind.
Gosh, Pastor, so love talking to you. Okay, what is your take on the fact that it's framed as not only born this way, that was like the old framing, right? You're born this way, which was a marketing ploy. But now it's, I'm being authentic. It's me, right? I'm living my life. It's the authentic me. What's your response to that?
So let me give two responses to that, because I think one, especially when we're using this term sexual anarchy, we're not talking about strictly homosexuality. We're talking about being able to choose, wake up tomorrow and place yourself anywhere on this gender spectrum that, as we know, and we like to mock because it's insane, there's a million different genders and you can be anywhere on the spectrum because it really is an eternal spectrum of some sort. And so we're talking about transgenderism. We're talking about sexual dysphoria, gender dysphoria. We're talking about sexuality outside of the bounds that God gave to us. So when you had this massive push in the late 90s, early 2000s that was saying, I was born this way, and then all of a sudden the coin switched and you said, you know what, I could be a homosexual today and I can be straight tomorrow. And then later I can be like a unicorn loving cat person. And like, I can be whoever I want to be because sexuality is fluid. You literally just broke your first axiomatic premise, which is I was born this way. That means you can't say it's wrong. And now you're saying I can change it at any point. Well, that's what we've been saying as Christians. We've been saying to do crazy things at any point in your life. It's a bad idea. You shouldn't do it because it's bad for you. And God wants you to be blessed and flourish and not be destroyed by the wildfire of sexual sin. And that's the idea of sexual sin, Mike, is like wildfires are out of control and they're destructive and they never stop. I don't know if you saw this today, but California, the story came out, California banned all travel to Florida and a couple of other states, all state-funded travel by their state people, because of these states are, and it's whoever it was, their state AG said something crazy like, we've never had an issue as severe in the sense of bigotry in the history of America as bigotry towards homosexuality. And you're like, didn't we have slavery one time? I'm pretty sure there were worse issues as related to bigotry in the history of the nation, other than some tax law that you're referring to that you don't think sexual couples.
That law in Florida was that boys can't compete in girls' sports. That was the one he was referring to. That's the most bigoted thing that they could include.
How evil.
Insane.
How incredibly that men can't girls in the gym.
I got 90 seconds and I have 1,000 questions. Okay, I'm gonna give you a tough one. I saw John MacArthur, a video of John MacArthur ask this back when he used to go on Larry King Live all the time, right? And he did a pretty good job with it. So we're gonna toss it up and see what you can do. Gay parents, isn't it better for a kid to grow up with two dads or two moms than it is to survive in the evils of the foster care system, Pastor?
Well, first of all, I don't know that it's been proven that it's actually better. I mean, that's the first thing to tear for a number of reasons. But when you're talking about an issue that is a fundamental issue like family, like mom and dad, and saying a child needs a mom and dad, first of all, like, do you have a local benefit to that child? Maybe it's better than being in foster care. I don't know if it is, but if it is, even if there's a small good, it's at the expense of vast evil. And part of that vast evil is to say, we don't need a dad, or we don't need a mom, or you're fungible units, or you're one and the same, and a mom is just as good as a dad. We're saying humans aren't made differently. We're not, Jesus is the one who said, in the beginning, God made them male and female, he created them, and he, called them into this covenantal blessing. It's this crazy scripture in Malachi nobody talks or says because it's so wild. Malachi chapter 2 or 3, it says that when God joins man and woman, he joins them together and he places a piece of his spirit in their union. And it says, so when a man divorces his wife, he wears a garment as a violence against God himself. What's crazy? What's the idea is that God so loves the union of man and woman coming together to produce offspring, he places a piece of his spirit in this sacred joining. So to say, it's just as good to have two dads or two moms literally breaks the form that God gave us for humanity itself. So you can say, is there a small local good? Well, is that small local good offset the tremendous breaking of a society? I don't think, in fact, it does. And it's a logical fallacy anyway to say that this tiny good makes the rest of all of homosexuality some good thing. It's totally
that's the trick there. Pastor, we talked for hours. Super grateful for you. Everyone go check out the pastor and his church, Pastor Dave Engelhardt. Thank you, sir. King's Church, New York City.
My pleasure.
Thank you, brother. We'll do it again tomorrow. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word.